The Art of Culinary Spaces visits Liberty University's Reber-Thomas Dining Center, where a comprehensive campus dining overhaul has transformed both the physical space and students' perceptions of institutional food. This ambitious project doubled the facility's footprints while introducing a pod-based serving system that emphasized freshly prepared, visible. Join me in welcoming FCSI member Doug Huber from Foodservice Design Studios as we discuss how this innovative approach has dramatically increased participation rates and enhanced the campus dining experience. Welcome to the show today. We're here to talk about the Reber-Thomas Dining Center at Liberty University and the new Facility of the Year award from NACUFS last year. For season 3, we're going to keep the tradition alive this year with the same first question, and that is, Doug, how did this project come about?
Yes, so we've done a number of projects with the architect that was contracted for this particular project. They had the confidence that we could handle the complicated nature of this, which required going to the existing facility, trying to determine the equipment that was in there that could be utilized in a new facility, because cost was a big issue. And being able to meet the other constraints that were involved with the project, cost being one, timing being another one.
We're going to get into a lot of those questions later on because there's a lot of cool things you guys had to look at before you could even really get started. But real quick, the other question I always like to ask is, what was the initial timeline and the budget plan at the beginning, and did that have to change throughout?
Well, originally, the challenge was that it was COVID. We were in a period where we couldn't walk around and move through the facility unless the students weren't there. So it was over a Christmas break where our entire team masked up and went into the old Reber-Thomas facility to do our initial assessments of the equipment. So the timing was a little fluid at that point. It was more of a feasibility. How do we figure out when we're going to do this? And oh, by the way, we need to make this transition when there aren't students around, which means that the transition has to happen over a summer, for example. So it was a bit fluid, but we knew it was going to be, because of the scope of the project and the size of the new building, we knew it was going to be a relatively long construction period. I think it was about a 9 to 12 month design and then 2-year construction period.
Wow. Now, obviously, they had to make a lot of changes. They needed them for a growing student population and the convocation events that happen twice a week. How did those two factors influence the scale and the design of the new facility that you guys came up with?
Liberty's been very successful and grown dramatically over the last couple of years, to the point where they physically couldn't get their student body through the entrance doors of the old facility and then get them fed. It took almost an hour, somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes, just to get the student body through the front door. So the throughput was huge. The convocation is a unique event in that the entire student body meets in the convocation, and then, because of the timing of the convocation, migrates directly to lunch and then goes on about the rest of their day. And it just put a huge burden on the old Reber-Thomas dining hall, which was located in the lower part of a building with low ceilings, and kind of felt like you're in a basement, because you were.
Yeah, exactly. Well, for 2 days a week, this convocation takes place. And you're talking about, from what I read in the article, 2,500 students, like you just said, all have to show up at once within an hour. So what changes immediately from before you even got into design, when you looked at this on the management side of things? Because I know you talk a little bit about how this was a great example how MAS and design kind of come together to make it one successful operation. So what changes did you see right away had to be made before you even designed the kitchen just to get those students taken care of so they weren't waiting that hour?
Oh, before you even start thinking about changes, Wade, you've got to think about all of the stakeholders and properly frame the challenges,
Yeah.
because each of the stakeholders had their own set of challenges. So, for example, the student body, their challenge was trying to get fed, trying to overcome the massive line that was at the door, and then the massive lines at each of the stations, trying to get fed. Then there was the stakeholders that were the workers serving the students, who were challenged because the production kitchen, where they actually had to do their prep work, was back in the kitchen, and the students were out front, and they couldn't be at the serving counters helping the students and doing their production work at the same time. Lots of walking, lots of inefficiencies. The catering staff had to share the kitchen with the main staff, and there was a bit of a competition over who's going to get first person to get in the oven wins, and that was creating a lot of ill will. The auxiliary, or the student services folks, particularly the vice president of student services, was constantly barraged with complaints from students, and staff and people that couldn't get in, and it was just a mess. Think about Black Friday and how difficult it is to get to the sales. There's this great demand, but you just can't get people through. Well, twice a week it was Black Friday for Reber-Thomas. So then you have the contractor Sodexo, who's trying to execute a menu, and the facility can't support what they're trying to do. So we were looking at every one of these stakeholders and identifying all of the challenges there, and then looking for solutions prior to just looking at the students and saying, how do we get these people through? There was a lot going on. There was also this overlying perception that because of the way the old Reber-Thomas was put together, the staff had to spread out their production times, which meant that there were things that were produced and then put in holding boxes and put on the serving lines. And the students saw food pans coming out of heated cabinets, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but there's a perception of, oh, this stuff's just been pre-prepared and they're just pulling it out and serving it. It's not freshly made. And to some extent, that's true, because the students couldn't customize anything. They didn't have that agency that comes from being able to say, I want that and that and that, and not this. It was a little, I want to say it was a lot of perception. It was some truth, but a lot of perception. And we were trying to overcome that at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and well, if you start off by not only waiting for an hour to get in, and then your perception is the food's not going to be very good because it's held and everything else. Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot to overcome right there, just in student behavior changes as well as student satisfaction, which obviously at a university, that's the customer. So you had a lot to walk through. So let's talk a little bit about the space, because the photos, and we'll put some up throughout this whole episode. It looks gorgeous, but this took on a pretty good lifestyle of its own too, which is, I'll describe a little. It's got 120,000 square foot of space now, and 27 food stations over a 2-level period. How did you guys come up with the idea of self-sustaining food pods, if you will, and explain that for the audience? But the food pods, and then how did that impact the food prep and service that would give those students a little bit better opportunity to see things being done for them, to know that it's a little more fresher than you think it was in the past?
Yeah. So this was a real challenge. And this is the challenge that really exercised or blurred the line between operations and design. So from an operating standpoint, it's important to understand what parts of the process that if you put it in front of the client will have impact. So
Mm-hmm.
for example, if you think about making bread, um, putting flour in a mixer and water and that kind of thing, great. You put that in front of a client or somebody that doesn't know anything about baking and they just see something going on. But if you put fresh bread coming out of an oven in front of a client, that resonates with them. So the first thing that we thought about as a design team is what parts of the project of the production process can we bring out to the front
Yeah.
of the student and get immediate impact? In construction, that would be, hey, if you paint the walls, you get a lot of impact for little price. Well, that's kind of how we were thinking about this is how do we maximize impact? Then we looked at operations and said, there are all these different concepts that you can start to think about them in terms of grouping because they utilize the same equipment. They have similar food prep processes. So you group them together and now you're thinking to yourself, well, the stuff that doesn't have a high impact, we can put in the back of the house, and the things that have high impact we'll put front of the house. Okay. And then you start thinking about some concepts around distributed dining, which is serving remote from where you're making the food, or just at least putting food in different places. And you take all these concepts and you start to put them together and you say to yourself, wow, how do we do this? Oh, what if we group 3 or 4 of the concepts together and give them a little mini kitchen?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so what we basically did is we created a kitchen and then surrounded the whole small kitchen, basically a day kitchen, surrounded it with the various like concepts or concepts that use the same kind of food prep techniques. We put a walk-in cooler freezer in it, a hood, and allowed that to be sort of a self-sustaining operation on a day basis. So you can put together a requisition sheet. You know what all your pars are. You go downstairs to the massive walk-in cooler freezer downstairs and the dry storage downstairs. You load up your carts, you take them upstairs, and you spend the first hour and a half just putting your inventory in place. And then the rest of the day, you run it out of that little kitchen. The kicker is that on the kitchen, we put pretty big wall openings so that even if as a student comes up to the counter, if the employee, the worker happens to be in the kitchen, they can still make eye contact.
Oh, cool.
So the time for a student to walk up to the counter and then be recognized is virtually instantaneous. In the old Reber-Thomas, if a student walked up to a counter to a service and the employee happened to run to get a pan of food or any number of other things, there could be a huge delay. So we looked at it from an operating standpoint, broke it down, and then had this idea to group things together and bring the kitchen out front. And so
that's very cool, though.
We called them pods because, we didn't what do you call that? There are 7 pods with like stations at each pod. And when I say like stations, I don't mean the same kind of food. It's just the production techniques are the same.
Right. So that obviously solves the problem of the dining hall. How did catering, you said that was one of the stakeholders as well. How have they reacted to this and what have they been able to do?
So interesting. And this is a good challenge to have. And it's one that is, I'm seeing across our clients in the college and university feeding world. Catering is its own revenue generating stream. And like many of our clients, Liberty's catering operation had grown, had become very popular, especially during football season with tailgating. They've had some success with their sports programs, and they use the catering obviously for fundraising and for recruitment, and it had become really popular. And they're trying to share the same kitchen as the main Sodexo employees. So what we did is we just said, you know what? There's a couple of things. This is a multi-story building, and catering is in and out. So let's put them near the loading dock and give them their own kitchen. And so it's totally separated. It is adjacent to the bakery. The bakery for the entire campus is located next to the catering kitchen, and they share a pot wash room because they're generating a lot of pots and pans in both of those operations. But it gives them easy access to storage. They have their own walk-ins, their own dry storage, and they can get in and out of the building and get to the various remote areas on campus very easily. So
Nice.
It separated the two. It eliminates the competition with the production equipment and gives them in and out of the building without impacting. Students don't even know when catering's going in and out of the building because it's
Right.
It's completely different. It's a completely separate area.
Well, they've got to be thrilled with that, I'm assuming, because, you know, if you don't have to compete and you're right next to loading docks, you get it done, you're out the door quickly, makes life a lot easier for those student workers and for the people overseeing all the student workers.
Not only that, but the folks that utilize that catering operation for their events. So if the president has a special function, the president is being better served by the catering operation. If they're doing a massive fundraising or they're having a big tailgate, all of that just builds on itself. So it's not only is your catering staff happier and your main staff happier, but the folks that utilize that service are being served better.
Yeah. Very cool. Now, one of the things that, because you mentioned it earlier, and it's in the article, that, you know, for their budget plan to work and to get financing and everything they needed to make this change and make this, you know, massive changeover for this new dining hall, you had to make a conscious effort to keep some of the equipment that was there in the previous facility. And then obviously you had to decide what stayed, what needed to be replaced, and then also what new equipment may needed to be come in to not only replace, but if there was anything new. I don't know if catering or dining had any new concepts that they were bringing in that maybe equipment didn't work for them. But can you walk us through how you and your team went through the whole system that was already there and decided what needed to stay, what needed to be replaced, and then if anything new needed to be brought in?
Sure. The first step was a total assessment of what was already there and the condition it was in, which is a very involved endeavor. We had to pull model numbers off of every single piece of equipment that was there, some of which was highly specialized. For example, a donut fryer. To talk about the donut fryer, once a week in front of all the students is donut morning, and they pump out fresh made donuts in front of all the students, and the students love it. It's one of their treats. So that was a piece of equipment that, to the extent it was going to be able to be reused, we had to reuse it. So the first step is, let's see what we have and see what condition it's in. And then remember, it's going to be 3 years before it's used. So we need to make sure it might be on its last leg now, or it might be still suitable for reuse 3 years from now. So all of that assessment takes place, and then that gets put aside, and you figure out how to design what will solve the challenges of all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
Then you put the two together and say, okay, which pieces here that we've got in this design are already over here, and we put them in. And then you look at the budget and you go, we better find some more pieces. And so it's a give and take. And
Right.
ultimately, you end up making compromises. Sometimes you have to go back and you have to say, this particular way of doing something is a very good way of doing it, but there's a different way and it'll allow us
Right.
to use some of this other equipment. And so you do that. For example, we reused the tray accumulator conveyor. So that's a highly engineered piece of equipment that fits in the building. We had to make sure that the tray drop area would accommodate it. And so there was an awful lot of work to say, okay, we've got to make this building opening and all the utilities exactly what we have over here, and bring that tray accumulator in pieces and then reassemble it and make sure it works down here. So that was a big thing. And 2 flight type dishwashers walked down the sidewalk and were put into the new Reber-Thomas. So there was some significantly challenging equipment that got moved. It wasn't just a sink or a double stack convection oven. It was pretty challenging.
So I'm curious to know, I've worked on a few college campuses in my career, so I'm curious to know how they were able to do it, because if I was on campus and saw this giant flight type dishwasher being moved down the sidewalk somewhere to another building, I would be very questioning what the heck was going on. How were you able, or how was the team able to figure out how to make that work? Did you work with the rep groups, or did you work with the manufacturer? Did you work with the local dealer? I mean, who did you work with in order to figure out how you could move this massive temperamental piece over and move it from one building to a next?
Some pieces are easier than others. The hardest pieces require the help of the manufacturer, because we needed manufacturer oversight to ensure that the pieces were taken. And I'm thinking about the tray accumulator more than anything. That needed to be taken apart properly so that it could be reassembled properly. And there's a construction phasing. So a lot of new equipment and support equipment can go into the new building, and then the critical things get moved during the summer, which is what happened. So there was a whole lot of pre-work done. And then as soon as the student body was gone for the summer, then the critical pieces like flight type dishwashers were then moved, reassembled, started back up, ensured that they were working properly, so that on day one, when the students came back from summer break, they were ready to roll.
Nice. And so now that's been open a little bit, what kind of operation, whether operational or satisfaction or whatever it is, what kind of feedback have you heard from Liberty as far as the new center goes?
The feedback that we heard is they absolutely love it. And the reason they love it is because they were such a big part of the solution that it's their design. There's nothing more satisfying than hearing a client say, wow, this is such a great design. It does exactly what we want. Because if you translate that into design speak, that means you listened to your client and gave them the solution that is going to give them the most bang for their buck. And they love it. Now, that doesn't mean it was perfect, because when they got in and started using it, they discovered a few things that they wanted to tweak. That we wanted this condiment counter doesn't work where we want it. They've moved it. So there's things like that in a building this size, you're going to find. You're not going to get everything exactly right, but we hit it out of the park. We didn't hit it into the water at San Francisco Field, but we got it over the wall.
Nice. Very well said. Well, that's all the questions I got for you today, Doug. But before I let you go, how can the public find out more about you and Foodservice Consultant Studios?
The best way is to search on the web. You can find our website at www.foodserviceconsultantstudio.com, or they can look at the FCSI website and do a search for consultants in Virginia, and we'll come up that way as well.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Art of Culinary Spaces. We hope this conversation has sparked your creativity and inspired new ideas within the world of food service design and planning. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all of our future podcasts. Stay tuned for our next episode when we explore another groundbreaking project and exceptional design from FCSI members that are transforming the culinary landscape.